So someone posted this on another Discord somewhere. I don't remember which one, but it's this whole nice tweet thread that it kind of goes over the Epic versus Google thing. It kind of popped into the news a while ago, and it really hasn't surfaced that much. There have been a couple people that have talked about it, but this is kind of big stuff that kind of came out from it. So this person basically shows the redacted versus the unredacted antitrust complaints against Google. And so if we... Oh, come on. Don't do this to me. Oh. Actually, I think I've got a better way to do this. Is it .com? That one. Can I just, I don't have knitter set up as an auto thing. So this should make it a tons easier. Okay. So if we open that up, Epic has publicly advocated for years Google cease the anti-competitive conduct addressed in this first amended complaint. Google refused to change its industry impacting conduct. Instead, Google offered to placate Epic by offering its preferential terms on side deals such as YouTube sponsorships and cloud services. If Epic agreed to distribute Fortnite in the Google Play Store and accede to Google's 30% tax. So I have not read any excerpt of these complaints before this video. So I wasn't aware that those are the special preferential treatment that Google was offering at all over this, which is interesting. Google has reached preferential deals with other major mobile app developers such as Activision Blizzard, blank. And so if we open up the unredacted Activision Blizzard, okay, as part of an initiative Google originally called Project Hug and now refers to as the Apps and Games Velocity Program. Okay. These deals allow Google to keep its monopolistic behavior publicly unchallenged, but Epic is not interested in any side deals that might benefit Epic alone while leaving Google's anti-competitive restraints intact. Instead, Epic is focused on opening up the Android ecosystem for the benefit of all developers and consumers. So Epic also has in Unreal a way to export Android games, and so that's kind of a big deal, which means that Epic does take royalties basically each year for someone that uses the Unreal Engine for their game. And so this would mean that they're only paying that royalty to Epic rather than also getting Google's cut on top of it. Some of these things that Google does, obviously smaller developers don't get for doing their apps and stuff. They basically have to do their own thing, I guess. And so it looks like for being a big firm, you get special preferential treatment and you get special bonuses to promote your stuff because you're big and you placated to their deal, which it looks like Blizzard has done. Google's monopoly power can be demonstrated by, among other things, Google's massive market share in terms of app downloads. The European Commission determined that within the market, more than 90% of Android apps downloads through app stores that have been done through the Google Play Store. through app stores have been done through the Google Play Store. So 90% of all Android app downloads happen through Google Play. Indeed, although app stores for merchant mobile OSs other than Android are not included in the Android app distribution market, European Commission found that the only such app store with any appreciable presence was Windows Mobile Store, which was compatible with the Windows Mobile OS. Commission determined that even if the Windows Mobile Store share was included in the market, Google Play Store would still have a market share greater than 90%. Oh, so it's more than 90%, which is very significant. A 2017 Google report confirmed that. So here's the redacted part. Confirmed that the Google Play Store dominates in all countries, including the United States. Google has recognized that in one quarter, June to September 2016, app installations through channels other than Google Play, including direct downloads in competing app stores, amounted to a mere 4.4% of Android app downloads in the United States. So what I'd find interesting is that is downloads period? Because I know Google Play has a high level of shovelware because of the low barrier for entry. All you do is you pay $25 and you have a developer account literally. And after that, if you have any charges, basically any apps that are charged for, they take their cut off the top of any in-app purchases and whatnot. But if this includes F-Droid and the like, then that would be interesting. And how can they track all that without when there are other privacy-oriented OSs as well? And does that include micro-G? And are they able to track that through micro-G? So those numbers may be inaccurate, so you can take that with a grain of salt, I would say. Okay. Let's see, okay, so yeah, dominates in all countries. Okay, so moreover, the close relationship that Google maintains with Apple further reduces Google's incentive to compete, innovate, and invest in app distributions because Google benefits by cooperating with its competitor Apple. So this is the whole cooperation thing, where they cooperate together. I kind of only looked at what was the content of the tweet itself rather than the actual documents. So, as Google's former founder and former CEO Larry Page once told Apple CEO Steve Jobs during a private meeting in 2010 about a partnership between Android and iOS, there will always be places we compete and places where we cooperate. For example, for over 15 years, Google has maintained an agreement with Apple whereby Google pays Apple a significant percentage of revenue derived from searches run on iOS devices, an estimated $8 to $12 billion per year in recent years, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, in exchange for Apple making Google Search the default search engine on the Safari browser. So this is significant because Google has done this with Firefox as well, where they will put in for that. And Firefox still, I believe, has Google as their default search engine because of this deal. That's where Firefox gets their funding from. And Google hasn't done this with Microsoft, so that's why Bing still has a 30% market share in search engine usage. Siri voice command searches and other search access points on Apple's devices. Default status on Apple devices is valuable to Google because Google search advertising is Google's main revenue source. And through its agreement with Apple, Google ensures that its own search, and therefore search advertising, will be used on virtually all mobile devices, whether iOS or Android, as most consumers are unlikely to change these settings on their phone and will become Google search users by default. So this is important. So for the more conscious person, they do change their search engine. But you'll notice that Google has a habit of basically making ad results in embedding that into widgets in the Google search results page, which basically makes it so that you're more likely to also click those or tap those results. And being as they're at the top, and I think at this point, I haven't used Google in a while, but I think from what some other people have shown, you've got like the top half that is like a whole bunch of fluff, including the ads in it. Whereas you get like DuckDuckGo and they'll give you like maybe 2 or 3 ads and that's about it. And then like you'll get Circs. It'll have like maybe a couple widgets, not even, but most of it is just search results. Brave gives you like a couple like fancy like widgets and side stuff, but that's about it. So like if I were to search for Google, no. So it's going to use my Circs instance by default. And this is why it's important, because you can see that it has like the sidebar stuff here. It gives you like the little Wikipedia thing. If we go to duck, what was the shorthand for that one? I'll use it over here. So we can go and search Google here with DuckDuckGo. And you can see we've still got the side thing. We do have the images in here as well. I do have ads turned off, so if can I turn that back on? All settings. I do have advertisements on. Okay, so we go Google. And it really doesn't, I don't see any ads, but it's not that bad. So if we go and do the same thing with a Google search, you can see we've got the widget. We've got about the same thing here. So let's compare with water enhancers. So we've got basically our full results. There's no sidebar, nothing here. We go here, we search the same thing. We get a bunch of results, no ads, and oh wait, I've got ad block on. That's why. So that does make a difference. I have ad block on, so I think that's what's interfering with it. And then we do the same thing here. And you can see we've got Amazon, and then it gives us like this list of stuff, this list of fluff that we don't have here, but these are like straight up hit results as well. We do have the same Amazon link here on DuckDuckGo, but I believe this one is floated to the top because they paid for it. You've got the other results on the side here, and so on. So you can sit here and go through it, and it's like, I'd hope these water enhancers are gluten-free. Where is it? I saw it here somewhere. I swear on my life. But I don't see why water enhancers, our little flavoring things, need that. Let's see. Because Android and iOS account for over 99% of smartphone OSs installed on mobile devices, Google's agreement with Apple guarantees that Google will generate revenue from virtually all smartphone OS users, regardless of whether they choose to purchase iOS or Android devices. So they compete, but they cooperate very, very well. Okay? And then I think this is the most damning one of them all, but because Google reaps considerable profits from iOS users through its search arrangements with Apple, Google is not incentivized to compete more with Apple at the smartphone OS level and expend more resources attracting users from iOS to Android than it currently does. If it did not profit significantly from searches on iOS devices, Google might be more incentivized to, among other things, differentiate its Android platform from Apple with respect to the commission it charges on app transactions. So this is kind of the whole like, attracting developers as well. And that kind of a thing. If they didn't cooperate so well, then Apple would have more incentive to actually create a different system for like Apple developers probably than what they have. If Apple competed with iOS, if Android competed with iOS on app transactions, the market competition would make Android apps cheaper for users and attract developers to launch their apps first or even only on Android. We see this more particularly on Apple, where they're like Apple exclusive apps. There are a few Android exclusives, but they're usually cheaper ones that way. So, I mean, they're cheaper on Android, but that's because it's a lower bar of entry for Android versus Apple, because Apple you still have to pay every year. Instead, Google and Apple are cozy duopolist, offering virtually the same terms to developers and changing those terms in tandem, if at all. After a meeting involving senior executives of Google and Apple, notes of the meeting were exchanged between the two companies. The notes reflect blank. Our vision is that we work as if we are one company. So this is like the really damning part, because if you remember back when Alex Jones got banned from all social media, it basically all happened at once. This is not the only one where this has happened. When Trump was banned, it all happened at once at the same time. So this is not just for like your smartphone ecosystem. It seems to be a thing where all the social media on some level does cooperate and compete in the same sense that Google and Apple are, and that Epic has been trying to fight. The interesting thing is that Epic has the backing of Chinese money, with Tencent backing them, and I think to some respect Apple and Google both also to some extent have different Chinese money that are backing them. So they're kind of biting at each other, but how it's going to turn out is going to be very interesting. But the most important part is that when you see these services all ban someone at the same time, that's no coincidence, especially when it happens within the same like few hour period. Okay. Fearful that Epic and others would successfully begin distributing competing app stores in this way, Google designed and undertook coercive steps to foreclose this possibility. Specifically, Google has since 2019 entered agreements with certain OEMs. So basically, you can OEM unlock your device, but you have to go into developer settings. You have to enable certain security settings to do it. And so certain OEMs restricting the OEMs from pre-installing other app stores on most or all of their new Android devices they sell. So basically, the only store you're going to get is Google Play. And I think for the most part, Samsung devices, the only things that they have, well, no, they have their own app store as well. So they didn't get everyone, but most of them, like for the most part, you can find it's just Google. Pursuant to these exclusivity agreements, Google agrees to share with OEMs monopoly profits Google earns from its search business, and in some cases profits from the Play Store itself, in exchange for these OEMs' agreement not to pre-install alternative app stores. As described below, Google reached these agreements after specifically recognizing the competitive threat to its monopoly that Epic and other potential Android app distributors posed, and Google intentionally designed these agreements to lock in Google's monopoly power in high monetizing geographies. So China, they probably worked out a deal there. It's highly profitable for them to do this. This is a big boy. Let's go. In particular, documents that Google feared that. And finally, Google also recognized that facing its monopoly position in Android app distribution, Google's determined not to let this happen. First step was to prevent this. To prevent this was its decision to offer Epic a special deal to launch Fortnite on Google Play. So let's go see the full, well, let's go through this one too. Rationale for the deal also included, as part of these efforts, senior Google Play managers began reaching out to Epic. One manager contacted Epic's vice president co-founder to gauge Epic's interest in special deal and, among other things, discuss the experience of getting Fortnite on Android via direct downloading. The manager's call notes state that she viewed direct downloading Fortnite as frankly abysmal and an awful experience, and that Epic should worry that most will not go through the 15 plus steps. By the way, direct downloading is not 15 plus steps. If you go in, you download the app, you tap the APK, and it asks you to change security settings unless Google has changed that, but I have a phone from within the last year, and I have not seen that unless Samsung changed that step, which I don't see as the thing because it's the same on the Pixel. Google recognized that Epic might not accept this offer. And then full blanks everywhere. So 15 plus steps. They're inflating the thing there. In particular, documents that the Google's finance director for platforms and ecosystems prepared for the CFO of Alphabet around the time of Fortnite's launch in Android showed that Google feared that what it terms a contagion risk resulting from more and more app developers foregoing Google Play. Google feared that the contagion would spread in this way, first inspired by Epic's example. Powerful developers such as Blizzard, Valve, Sony, Nintendo, creators of some of the most popular and profitable entertainment, would be able to go on their own, bypassing Play by directly distributing their own apps. Then other major developers, including EA, King, Supercell, and Ubisoft, would choose to co-launch off Play, collaborating to forego Google's distribution services as well. And finally, Google Play even identified a risk that all remaining titles will co-launch off Play. Google calculated the total at-risk revenue from the threatened loss of market share in Android app distribution from $3.6 billion, with the profitability weighted loss conservatively estimated at $550 million through 2021. Google recognized that the recent Fortnite-Samsung partnership further applies risk and urgency of problem facing its monopoly position in Android app distribution. Google was determined not to let this happen. Okay. So to prevent this, the contagion was its decision to offer a special deal for Fortnite. In July 2018, senior Google executives held a special irregular off-cycle meeting of its business council comprised of some of the Google's highest-ranking executives, including Alphabet CFO. At this meeting, the Google Play team sought approval for a custom cross-PA, cross-product area partnership with Epic Games worth up to $208 million. Incremental cost to Google of $147 million over 3 years. The notes from this meeting indicate that Google believed Epic was choosing to distribute Fortnite off Google Play, to express frustration about closed ecosystems, iOS and consoles, through use of direct downloading on Android to distribute via their website, and that such an action would threaten Play revenue and the broader business model. The rationale for the deal also included the high-risk contagion with up to $310 million in revenue at risk. When one Google executive asked for the exact Play Store revenue share, if we can get the deal with them, a director of finance responded that the key premise of this proposal is that we would protect the revenue share terms and hold them at the 70-30 split in line with our current business model to ensure we don't establish a precedent that puts at risk our broader ecosystem. He represented the business council that the additional revenue share to Epic was roughly 5%, meaning after accounting for the special benefits Google had determined to offer, Google would receive an effective discounted revenue share of 25% rather than the standard 30%. The business council approved the offer to Epic. So here they are sitting here and basically laying out the case like, here's what we need to do to protect our profits, and here's how we prevent them from going through the traditional means that people have done for ages on Windows by direct downloading their installers and installing their games themselves, so that we can have that share and also dumb down the process for them. As a potential alternative, A senior Google executive proposed that Google consider approaching Tencent, a company that owns a minority stake in Epic, to either buy Epic shares from Tencent to get more control over Epic, or join up with Tencent to buy 100% of Epic. Another senior Google executive suggested that if Epic chose not to launch Fortnite on Google Play, Google could lock down Play in Android and not allow sideloading or make it very hard to sideload, a policy position or even architecture difficult move in the face of the EC decision, but we have good privacy security arguments about why sideloading is dangerous to the user. The biggest argument as to why is the user is stupid. That's the only real reason why. These other reasons that people come up with for like keeping sideloading out is stupid. Okay, so yeah, they looked to buy all or part of Epic. So they were basically trying to uncompete the compete stuff. Contagion, among other initiatives discussed below, Google increased its focus on nascent competitive threats posed by Epic and others who may be able to offer alternative app stores in Android, including by negotiating for pre-installation of such apps with stores with OEMs. Indeed, Google recognized that. Oh. Okay. So pre-installation. In 2019, a presentation prepared by Google Play's finance team, Google estimated that the most likely scenario among the scenarios it considered was that Epic would strike a deal for the distribution of its Epic Game Store with one mobile OEM, or as many as 3 to 5 mobile OEMs, in addition to the collaboration agreement it had entered with Samsung. Google forecasted that Epic's Android store would attract numerous developers who would migrate mature Western US titles to Epic Store, which would capture 50% spend in those games on those devices. Indeed, Google recognized that Epic's entry could dramatically reduce the barriers faced by new market entrants. Every developer that follows Epic's path and launches on the Epic Store will have less friction and a larger addressable user base than title before it. And even if a developer attracted fewer users by supporting a new market entrant rather than relying on Google Play, they could still earn more revenue due to the favorable 88-12 revenue share offered by the Epic Games Store. Developers can afford to take a 20% performance hit on Epic Store and still break even. In 2019 document, Google estimated that entry by Epic Games Store alone threatened a most likely loss of $350 million of Google's monopoly revenue, and a max risk of $1.4 billion by 2022. Google also identified a probability-weighted combined loss of $1.1 billion and $6 billion of total at-risk revenue if other stores, including those distributed by Samsung and Amazon, were able to gain full traction. So here's the issue here. Basically, they're looking at their losses, and they were trying, and they, in spite of some of the regulation against it, were looking at ways that they could still make it harder for people to compete on a fair playing field, and that would force everyone to use Google Play so that they could continue to hold their monopoly, just like Apple does with iOS devices. But Apple's okay to do that because they're a premium product, just like Google can do it because they're a private company. Google's efforts to foreclose competition in this way were a resounding success. And that's all in that paragraph. Let's read the rest of it. Within a matter of months after the Premier Device program began, Google recognized that the program had successfully eliminated the risk of contagion. By May 2020, many of the world's largest and most popular Android OEMs had agreed to Google Play exclusivity for most of their new Android devices, Motorola and LG, which Google had targeted for extra financial incentives. Both committed nearly all, 98% and 95% of their devices to the Premier program. The giant Chinese conglomerate BBK, which manufactures and sells a large range of Android devices under its Oppo, Vivo, and OnePlus brands, among others, had designated around 70% of its new devices as Premier. Other brands participating in the program included Xiaomi, 40%, HMD, which manufactures devices with Nokia mobile brand, 100%, Sony, 50%, Sharp, 50%, and other 80%. In a presentation prepared by and presented to senior Google Play executives, Google noted that in the short time since the beginning of the program, over 200 million new devices were covered. The same presentation shows that Google believed that the new RSAs successfully eliminated the risk of app developer contagion, noting that there was no risk under the current Premier tier. So here what they've done, my LG phone that I still am somewhat holding on to has its own app store. So this program came into place after I got that phone. So it still has its own OEM app store, but it still has a Google Play Store as well. So this is kind of that like conflict of interest, like monopolistic behavior that they're talking about, where they basically took everyone and like wiped it all up. And you can see that they are making a lot of money at this too. This is like more revenue than even the US government gets in through the IRS, I'm pretty sure that they're making. And it's astounding. And this is why some people argue that Google should be broken up, and among other things, that like big tech is more powerful than any government on the planet. Like the Holy Roman Empire can't even compare to the power that Google has, especially at these lengths that they're going, and the lawyers and that the executives can pay for. So we skipped that nice block. Beginning in 2009, Google entered into revenue share agreements with various MNOs that split Android market share between app developers, MNOs, and Google. Under these arrangements, app developers typically received blank. Google received the ring blank. Google understood that this blank revenue share for MNOs. Google increased the market share of Android market by adopting revenue share agreements that split the revenue from app purchases with certain MNOs. Google knew at the time that mobile operators are not willing to give up the revenue stream on content distribution. We'll block market if we don't share revenue. So they shared revenue because they knew that it would be the way that they could lure them in. Under these agreements, app developers typically received 70% of a given purchase, while MNOs received 20 to 25%, and Google received the remaining 5 to 7% for its operating and transaction costs. Google understood that this 20 to 25% revenue share for MNOs provided incentive for operators to distribute Android market by offsetting the opportunity cost of giving their own app distribution channels. So they forgo all this operating costs and take the leftover, and then they still make billions on top of it all. Because at the same time, a bunch of that money still goes back into Google's pockets. Okay. And then this is the last one. In motion to dismiss, Google has argued that the existence of Samsung's Galaxy Store, which exists only on devices that Samsung sells, is somehow fatal to plaintiffs' claim of actual foreclosure. First, Google. Secondly, so Samsung Galaxy Store, yeah, it's still there. Using that as an argument when you have like 90% of the market like blocked out because you bought them all out, still a bad argument. And it's still a bad argument as to like why. Google dominates so much here, and it's blah blah blah. But documents discussing Google's Project Banyan demonstrate how Google attempted to negotiate a deal with Samsung that would prevent the Galaxy Store from becoming a competitive threat and impose Google's anti-competitive Google Play billing tie on apps distributed by Samsung. In April 2019, Google executives traveled to Korea to meet with Samsung to discuss an app distribution proposal. Internal documents presented to Google's business council revealed the details of this proposal. First, Google sought Samsung's agreement that Google Play would host the apps and games distributed by the Google Play Store, the Galaxy Store, and that the Google Play would provide infrastructure support to Galaxy Store, including Play billing, ensuring that Google's in-app payment solution would be used in apps distributed through the Galaxy Store. Because Samsung would thus forego store services revenue, Google planned to make annual payments to Samsung of up to $60 million, which was Google's top-end estimate of the current operating profit of the Galaxy Store, but a small fraction of the likely 2022 margin risk to Play. Second, the Business Council documents indicate that Google sought Samsung's agreement that the Play and Galaxy Store would be the only app store on the default home screen, ensuring that Samsung could not provide convenient placement to any other competing app store. Google recognized that such a deal, in conjunction with a developer-focused plan described below called Project Hug, would mitigate risk that top game developers deprioritize Google Play for title distribution and secure the Play revenue margin at risk, which was up to $6 billion or $1.1 billion in 2022 alone, in an email exchange. So, again, it's like, well, Galaxy Store still exists. Yeah, because they said no, probably. And not because you allowed it. You sought to basically turn that into your own. Having Galaxy Store as a front means that they could, oh no, we still allowed this one, but then you look at the back end and it's still all Google and they're getting all the money still, which means they still have a monopoly on the market. This is the kind of anti-compete stuff that they're talking about. And then you look at YouTube and the way that operates and everything else, and there are just FTC violation, like fair trade violations across the board, even internationally, but a lot of these places don't care. And this is what this whole complaint is about. And it's amazing. I mean, you look at how all of these companies have acted, and then you get to see inside of it in this unredacted document, and it all makes sense. Just makes sense. I don't know really what else to say. I kind of added the comments as I went, so I think that is everything for that. So if you want to discuss this further, you can join the Discord, join the Guilded, like any of the chat links down in the description. I'll pretty much be there. Like, I may not respond right away, but I'll be there. And I will see you guys all later.